When people hear the word stillness, they often confuse it with emptiness or lifelessness. They think of it as something passive, something that lacks movement, ambition, or energy. But this misunderstanding is the very reason why most human beings remain restless all their lives, because they fear what they do not understand. Stillness is not the absence of life, it is the very foundation of it. You see, we have come to believe that to be active is to be alive. If the body is moving, if the phone is ringing, if the mind is racing, then something is happening, and we have learned to worship that kind of chaos. But look deeper. The most profound aspects of life happen not in noise, but in silence. A seed germinates in silence. The stars move without a sound. Your own breath, the very engine of your life, goes unnoticed unless you stop and pay attention. Stillness is not a vacuum, it is a powerful presence. It is alert, aware, and fully conscious. The problem is, most people have only experienced stillness in moments of boredom or lethargy, so they associate it with dullness. But true stillness is not dull, it is intense, it is vibrant, it is alive in a way that constant activity can never be. When your mind becomes still not because it is tired, but because it is centered, you begin to touch a deeper intelligence within yourself. Right now, most people are caught up in a frenzy of thoughts, fears, desires, and distractions. Their attention is scattered like sunlight diffused through a fog, but stillness is like a lens. It gathers all your energy, all your awareness, into a single beam. And when that happens, what you see is not distorted by emotion or mental noise. You begin to see life as it is, not as you imagine it to be. This is why the great sages and mystics, not just in India, but around the world, have always spoken of silence, of inner stillness, as the gateway to true knowing. When you are still, you are not absent. You are more present than ever before, because presence is not about being loud, it is about being fully here, not half here, half in your phone, half in your past, half in your fantasies, but wholly rooted in the moment. Just observe the natural world. The mountain stands still, and yet it holds the sky on its shoulders. The ocean, when calm, reflects the moon in its full glory. The most powerful beings in nature do not scream for attention. Their stillness is their strength. In that stillness there is no insecurity, no rush, no need to prove anything. There is just presence, solid, unshakable, and full of grace. But to arrive at that kind of stillness is not a trick or technique. It is a journey inward. It is the result of learning to sit with yourself without craving distraction. Most people cannot sit alone for even 5 minutes without reaching for some noise, some movement, some stimulation. That is not freedom, that is addiction, and the cost of that addiction is your clarity, your peace, and your presence. When you begin to experience true stillness, you realize that everything you were chasing outside the success, the validation, the sense of meaning was not out there. It was always waiting for you in the center of your being, behind all the noise. And once you touch that space, you no longer operate from fear or lack. You move through life with ease, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer tossed around by every thought and emotion. You become rooted. This rootedness is not arrogance, it is stability. It is not about becoming rigid or indifferent. It is about being so deeply anchored within yourself that you no longer seek identity in the fleeting movements of the world. In that space of stillness, you begin to operate from clarity, not compulsion. Your actions become intentional, your speech becomes deliberate, your presence becomes magnetic, not because you are trying to be someone, but because you are simply being fully and truly. And that is the essence of stillness. It is not an escape from life. It is the most intimate contact with life, because only in that space where nothing moves can you truly see everything as it is. Stillness is not a void. It is the field in which all possibilities exist, not yet disturbed, not yet distracted. It is from this field that true creativity, true insight, and true vision arise in life. The quality of our actions is not determined just by our intentions, but by the state of mind from which those actions emerge. When the mind is noisy, restless, cluttered with opinions, judgments, and emotional turbulence, every action becomes a reaction. It is not coming from choice, it is coming from compulsion. You are not acting, something is acting through you. Anger acts through you, fear acts through you, ego acts through you. But when the mind is still, when it has settled into silence, you do not react, you respond. And that makes all the difference. Reactions are mechanical. They are born of habit, conditioning, and unresolved emotion. If someone insults you and your mind is noisy, you do not even pause to choose your response. You snap back, maybe with words, maybe with silence laced with resentment. It is not because you decided this is the wisest course of action. It is simply because your inner state was too chaotic to allow any space between stimulus and response. There was no gap, no clarity, no room for intelligence. Just an automatic chain of cause and effect. But observe someone whose mind has become still, not dull, not indifferent, but still like the surface of a calm lake. When life throws situations at them, they do not react impulsively. They allow it to pass through them, they observe, they understand, and then they act not to defend the ego, not to prove a point, not to escape discomfort, but simply to address the situation in the most conscious way. That is a response, a conscious choice, not a compulsive eruption. You can experience this in simple everyday moments. Let's say someone cuts in front of you while driving. A noisy mind will flare up instantly. You start shouting in your head, maybe even out loud. Your heart races. Your hands grip the wheel. You might even honk or chase the person down. All this happens not because you chose to be angry, but because your mind was already vibrating at a certain frequency of agitation. The event merely triggered what was already sitting inside you. Now imagine your mind is still. The same situation occurs. Someone cuts you off. You notice it. You register it. But there is space within you. You are not caught up in it. You don't give away your peace in exchange for a moment of anger. You may still take action. Maybe you slow down. Maybe you change lanes. Maybe you let it go entirely. But it comes from presence, not from emotional chaos. That is the power of a still mind. It does not get hijacked by every passing wave. This ability to respond instead of react is not about suppressing emotions. It is about being rooted enough within yourself that emotions no longer control you. Emotions are beautiful, but they must be guided by awareness. In a noisy mind, emotion becomes fuel for drama. In a still mind, emotion becomes an instrument of depth and connection. You can feel deeply and yet not lose your center. When you are constantly reacting, you exhaust yourself. You burn energy in internal battles that achieve nothing. The mind jumps from one conflict to another, one irritation to another. You are always fighting the outside world because you have not made peace with the inner one. But when the mind is still, you carry a kind of unshakable calm. You no longer lose yourself in every situation. You remain anchored, and from that anchored place you act wisely, efficiently, and compassionately. Most human suffering is not because of what happens around us, but because of how we react to it. Words spoken by others, circumstances beyond our control, changes in life, these are all external events. The suffering comes when the noisy mind resists, complains, judges, or attaches meaning to these events. A still mind sees them for what they are, fleeting. It doesn't try to control everything. It flows, adapts, adjusts. And when action is needed, it acts without confusion. This is not a distant ideal. It is available to every human being, but it requires one thing, that you begin to observe your own mind, that you start noticing when you are reacting and ask, is this coming from clarity or chaos? The moment you ask that question, you have already created a gap. And in that gap lies freedom, freedom from compulsion, freedom from the prison of habit, freedom to respond with awareness. So the difference between a noisy mind and a still one is not just in how it feels, but in how it shapes your entire life. One creates more karma, more entanglement, more drama. The other brings ease, grace, and precision to every step. Because when you respond instead of react, you are not just moving with life, you are in tune with it. You are no longer a slave to every thought or impulse. You become a conscious participant in your own existence. Most people do not suffer from a lack of intelligence or talent. They suffer because their perception is clouded. It is not that they cannot see, it is that they see through layers of emotion, distortion, and inner noise. Just like a mirror smeared with dust cannot reflect clearly, the human mind overwhelmed with emotion cannot perceive reality as it is, and without clear perception, even the best intentions lead to confusion. Vision, true inner vision, does not require new eyes. It requires a still heart. Emotion in itself is not the problem. Emotion is a beautiful and powerful dimension of human life. It allows us to feel, to connect, to care. But when emotion becomes unbalanced, when it becomes excessive, reactive, or rooted in past wounds, it becomes a lens that distorts. You are no longer seeing the person in front of you. You are seeing your fear, your anger, your expectations projected onto them. You are no longer responding to the present moment. You are responding to your unresolved past. When emotion is unsettled, decisions become driven by compulsion rather than clarity. You may think you are choosing freely, but you are only reacting to an inner storm. One moment of anger can make you say something that takes years to repair. One burst of fear can make you abandon something you've worked for your whole life. One wave of desire can make you chase what you don't need while ignoring what truly matters. All because vision was blurred. The problem was not outside, it was the lack of stillness within. But when emotion settles, a certain sharpness enters your being. You are no longer tossed around by every thought or feeling. You begin to see things as they are, without narrative, without drama. This is the power of settled emotion. It becomes like a calm lake, reflecting the world clearly, without ripples, without exaggeration. You are no longer inside the storm, you are watching it pass from the shoreline, and from there your decisions become wise, your speech becomes measured, your presence becomes steady. This sharpness of vision is not just mental clarity, it is existential clarity. You begin to perceive what truly matters. You stop wasting energy on petty conflicts and emotional entanglements. You recognize the essence of people, situations, and choices. You understand when to speak and when silence is more powerful. You know when to act and when to wait. You are no longer reacting from habit, you are moving from awareness. People often ask how to develop intuition, how to access inner guidance. The answer is simple, though not always easy. Settle the emotional body. Not suppress it, not ignore it, but observe it, understand it, allow it to pass without becoming it. If you can watch your anger without acting on it, it loses its grip. If you can observe your fear without collapsing into it, it begins to dissolve. And when these clouds pass, what remains is a clear sky, the space in which true vision arises. You can notice this in your own experience. Have you not found that when you are calm, even the most complex situation seems manageable? But when you are emotionally triggered, even a small issue becomes overwhelming. The event is the same, it is your inner state that defines the quality of your perception. When the emotion is intense, vision narrows. You become tunnel-visioned, focused only on survival or defense. But when emotion settles, your awareness expands. You see not just the problem but the possibilities. This is especially true in relationships. Most conflicts do not arise from real incompatibility, but from emotional misperception. You think someone doesn't care because they didn't say the right words. You assume betrayal where there is only misunderstanding. You attack when you feel threatened, even if there was no real threat. But if you can pause, breathe, and allow the emotional charge to settle, you will often see that what felt like a mountain was just a shadow. Settled emotion does not mean you become cold or detached. On the contrary, it makes you more available to life. You are no longer absorbed in your own waves, so you can actually see others, feel others, connect without distortion. Your compassion deepens, but so does your discernment. You are no longer manipulated by your own needs or other people's moods. You remain centered, and in that centeredness, your actions become more impactful, your presence more grounding. This sharpening of vision is not about acquiring something new. It is about removing the noise that blurs what is already within you. Just like a photographer wipes the lens before taking a shot, you learn to clear your inner lens through awareness, breath, stillness. When the emotional dust settles, the world comes into focus. You don't just see more, you see deeper. You perceive essence, not surface. And from that perception, everything you do carries a different power in the world today. People are obsessed with the idea of success. They chase it in different forms: money, recognition, influence, status. From the moment they wake up, their energy is consumed in the pursuit of achieving something out there. But what most fail to see is that outer success, when it comes without inner clarity, becomes a burden more than a blessing. Without knowing who you are, where you're going, and why you're going there, success only amplifies confusion. Inner clarity is not about having answers to every question in the universe. It is about having a certain stillness within you, a certain sharpness of perception, so that you can navigate life with awareness instead of ambition alone. When you lack clarity, even your strengths become scattered. You try 10 different things, jump from one goal to another, and remain restless regardless of your achievements. But when clarity is present, your energy becomes aligned. Your actions are not just efforts, they become expressions of purpose. Most people do not fail because they lack resources. They fail because they lack direction. They may have time, intelligence, and opportunity, but without clarity, they are like an archer blindfolded, pulling the bow with full strength, but not knowing where the target is. They try hard, they move fast, but their life becomes an endless loop of activity without fulfillment. This is the cost of not cultivating inner clarity: activity without vision, motion without meaning. When you are clear within yourself, you don't need constant motivation from outside. Your clarity itself becomes your fuel. You are not driven by comparison or fear. You are not trying to prove yourself to anyone. You simply move in the direction that resonates with your deepest understanding, and in that movement, even your failures become stepping stones, not setbacks. Because clarity brings resilience, you may fall, but you fall consciously. You rise not because of external pressure, but because of inner coherence. Clarity is not something that falls from the sky. It is something that arises when you pay attention to your own life. When you stop being busy just for the sake of being busy and start looking inward. When you examine your choices, not with judgment but with awareness. Most people are not confused because life is complex. They are confused because they never sit still long enough to see clearly. They are entangled in noise, societal expectations, emotional baggage, unexamined beliefs. Clarity comes when you learn to step back, observe, and align. Inner clarity also means knowing what truly matters to you. Not what sounds good, not what others admire, but what genuinely brings meaning to your life. Without this, success becomes a game of imitation. You see someone doing well in a certain field, and you run in that direction. Then you see another, and you change paths. But when you are clear within, you are not easily swayed. You may admire others, but you do not abandon yourself. You walk your path not because it is the most glamorous, but because it is the most authentic. When inner clarity is missing, even relationships suffer. You start expecting others to fulfill your confusion. You want your partner, your friends, or your job to give you what you have not given yourself: direction, peace, identity. But no one can do that for you. Only you can find that inner anchor, and once you do, your presence in the world becomes more stable, more graceful. You are no longer seeking from others, you are sharing with them. Clarity also gives rise to integrity. When your thoughts, words, and actions are aligned, people can feel it. You don't have to convince anyone. Your clarity itself becomes your credibility. Whether you are speaking, working, or simply being, there is a consistency that others can trust. This is what gives real strength to leadership, creativity, and service. Not just skill, but clarity of intent. Even in the midst of chaos, a person with inner clarity can remain steady. They may not control the situation, but they do not lose themselves in it. Because they know who they are and what they stand for, this is not arrogance, this is groundedness. When you operate from this space, you are not desperate for success. You are dedicated to your path. And in that dedication, success often comes as a natural consequence, not because you chased it, but because you became capable of holding it. In a world where everyone is running faster, the one who pauses and sees clearly will always go further. Because direction is more important than speed, and direction comes not from outside, but from within. Inner clarity does not mean you know every step ahead. It means you are clear about your next step, and that is enough. With each clear step, the path reveals itself. And with each step grounded in clarity, your outer success begins to reflect your inner state. Most people think silence is the absence of something. That when there is no sound, no words, no noise, it means nothing is happening. But the truth is quite the opposite. Real silence is not emptiness, it is a powerful presence. It is not the absence of life, it is the very essence of life unclouded by noise. When you sit in silence, truly, you do not feel less, you feel more. You begin to sense something deeper than thought, louder than sound, more real than all your ideas about life. The human experience has been so heavily shaped by stimulation that silence has become uncomfortable for many. People avoid it. They fill every gap with a phone, a screen, a conversation, or some kind of distraction. They fear that silence will confront them with something unbearable, but what it really confronts them with is themselves. And that is where true transformation begins, because only in silence do you start to notice the mechanics of your mind. Only in silence do you become aware of what is real and what is imagined. Silence is not passive. It is intensely active in its own subtle way. It penetrates through layers of conditioning and takes you to a space within where words cannot go. You cannot argue with silence. You cannot manipulate it. You can only surrender to it. And when you do, something within you begins to align. Your breath slows down, your body relaxes, the mental clutter begins to fade, and what is left is a sense of presence, a beingness that does not depend on identity or achievement. In silence, there is no performance. You do not have to be someone. You do not have to say the right thing or look a certain way. You simply are, and this simple presence is healing. It reconnects you with the part of yourself that is untouched by the chaos of the world. In that space, clarity arises, not because you figure things out with logic, but because you see with stillness. You realize that many of the problems that seemed huge in the noise were just illusions magnified by restless thinking. Silence also deepens your ability to listen, not just to others, but to life itself. When you are silent within, you begin to pick up subtler signals. You notice the way the wind moves through the trees. You hear the emotion behind someone's words, not just the words themselves. You sense the right time to speak and also the right time to stay quiet. This kind of listening cannot be practiced through technique. It happens naturally when the mind becomes quiet and the heart becomes alert. There is a kind of intelligence that blooms only in silence. It is not the intelligence of information, but of perception. It does not rely on analysis, but on presence. When you are truly silent, you are not disconnected, you are more connected than ever. Connected to life, to others, and to yourself. In silence, the boundaries between self and other begin to blur. You feel a unity, a sense that you are not just living life, you are life. This is why the greatest realizations, the most profound insights, often arise not during discussion, but in moments of stillness. The mind may seek answers in books, in debates, in lectures, but the being finds answers in silence. Not answers in the form of words, but in the form of knowing, a kind of inner certainty that does not need validation. It is in this silence that wisdom dawns, not learned from outside, but uncovered from within. Many spiritual traditions have revered silence for this reason, not as an escape from life, but as a doorway into deeper life. When the surface noise settles, the depths become accessible. You begin to sense the vastness of your own existence. And in that vastness, problems shrink, fears dissolve, and desires find their rightful place. You no longer chase experiences. You become the space in which all experience happens. You can sit in a crowded room, full of activity, and still be silent inside. Because silence is not dependent on external conditions. It is an inner dimension. It is available to anyone who is willing to turn inward, to simply stop, sit, and be. It may seem like doing nothing, but it is the most vital thing you can do. Because in silence, you meet yourself not as an idea, not as a personality, but as a presence, and that presence is not bound by time, opinion, or memory. It is eternal, untouched, and full. Even a few moments of true silence can shift the direction of your life. It can reveal what noise could never show you. It can bring you back to center, back to balance, back to what really matters. In silence, life stops being a performance and starts being a profound experience. The nature of the human mind is such that when it is restless, it seeks, grasps, analyzes, and questions relentlessly. It goes in circles looking for clarity, but the very act of chasing becomes the barrier. When the mind is agitated, even the truth appears distorted. It is like looking into a pond while it's being stirred. The reflection is broken, fragmented, unclear. But when the water becomes still, the reflection becomes perfect. Similarly, a mind that is still doesn't need to run behind clarity. Clarity naturally arises from it, like fragrance from a flower. Most people assume that mental activity equals intelligence. That thinking more, talking more, planning more means they are closer to understanding. But understanding is not born out of activity, it is born out of awareness. And awareness can only bloom when the noise inside settles. A still mind is not a dull mind. It is a mind that has learned how to stay undisturbed. It is deeply alert, deeply conscious, yet untouched by the chaos that surrounds it. Chasing clarity through more thought is like trying to calm waves by splashing more water. The effort only adds to the turbulence. Real clarity dawns when you stop trying so hard to make it happen. It is not a product of stress, but of surrender. It is not achieved through control, but through conscious stillness. When you stop interfering, stop pushing, stop forcing, that is when the space opens up for clarity to emerge on its own. In this stillness, perception becomes effortless. You do not have to struggle to understand people or situations. You simply see. The fog of judgment, fear, memory, and expectation begins to lift. The moment becomes visible. This is the power of inner stillness. It removes the layers through which the mind distorts reality. You don't need to interpret every detail, because what needs to be known becomes self-evident. Life reveals itself when you are quiet enough to listen without resistance. When the mind stops chasing clarity, it becomes a source of it. People around you feel that. In your presence, they find calm, direction, and steadiness. You become someone who doesn't just talk about clarity, but embodies it. And this embodiment does not come from effort. It comes from learning to be at ease with not knowing, from being deeply rooted in stillness. A still mind is not afraid of uncertainty. It does not rush to conclusions. It does not panic when there are no answers. It trusts that what needs to be known will be known in time. Stillness is not a technique, it is a way of being. You don't practice stillness like you practice a skill. You invite it by letting go, by observing rather than reacting, by watching your thoughts rather than believing them. In that gentle witnessing, the mind naturally slows down, the breath softens, and your energy shifts from agitation to presence. In that presence, insight happens. Not because you chased it, but because you allowed it. People often ask how to find direction in life. But direction is not something you stumble upon while running in all directions. It becomes visible when you stop and become still. The answers are rarely hiding, they are simply obscured by your own mental noise. When that noise dissolves, you start seeing things not just as you think they are, but as they truly are. This is clarity. It is not a conclusion you reach. It is a state you allow. Stillness also gives rise to trust, not in others, not in systems, but in life itself. A still mind does not need constant assurance. It is not easily swayed by opinions or overwhelmed by events. It moves with quiet confidence, knowing that clarity is not something to be begged for or stolen. It is something to be aligned with. When your inner state becomes balanced, clear, and open, life begins to reflect that clarity back to you in the form of right people, right moments, right decisions. This doesn't mean that challenges disappear. It means that your ability to face them becomes more refined. You don't waste energy reacting to what doesn't need a reaction. You don't rush into things just to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. You learn to hold space for others, for yourself, for the unknown, and in that space, wisdom takes root. You are not merely reacting to life, you are responding from a deeper intelligence that arises only when the surface has stilled. You begin to radiate clarity not because you have all the answers, but because you are not afraid of the questions. Your stillness becomes contagious. It becomes a refuge for others, a compass in confusion, a silent guidance in moments of doubt. Not by doing more, but by being more present, more aware, more empty of noise and full of quiet power. A still mind does not chase, it attracts. It does not grasp, it allows. And in that allowing, clarity becomes a constant companion.